You have a number of concerns about our MAP Act, the first of which is that it seems to be economically inefficient. How so?
Well, it's inefficient, Mitch, because it forbids all sorts of development, any kind of development, even subdivision of land within transportation corridors that are defined by the Department of Transportation. That's really a crude approach to transportation planning because there's almost always some useful and productive way that land could be developed that wouldn't be precluded by some future transportation planning need.
Now, in addition to being inefficient, you also find that it's unfair.
It's unfair because the cost of all this falls on just those few landowners who happen to be have title to land that lies within one of these corridors. But the cost of transportation planning and providing for roads ought to be borne by the taxpayers as a whole.
In addition to being inefficient and unfair, you also say this MAP Act is unconstitutional.
Well, it's not really me who's saying that. It's the North Carolina Court of Appeals in an important decision just a couple of months ago. They said it's unconstitutional, and the reason is because what the Department of Transportation is exercising here isn't, as they have claimed, the power to regulate what's called the police power. What they've been exercising is the power of eminent domain, the power to take. And when under our Constitution and under the U.S. Constitution, when you take land or any kind of private property from a private citizen, you have to compensate them, and they haven't been doing that. The Court of Appeals has said that in the future they will have to do it, and in fact now they're going to have to go back and compensate all the landowners whose land they've been regulating in this way for decades.
In addition to all these concerns, the MAP Act is also unnecessary?
Well, that's the saddest thing about the whole thing. The MAP Act was passed in the 80s at a time, this was before even the collapse of the Soviet Union. Central planning still had something of a certain amount of credibility back then, but it certainly doesn't have it now. And even then, a lot of people were coming to the realization that central planning wasn't the way to go. Only a handful of states adopted statutes like the MAP Act, and unfortunately North Carolina was one of them. But the vast majority, I think by our recent study we did, found only 13 states have MAP Act-like statutes. The other 37 managed just fine without them, and we can too.
And you just mentioned that we can manage without one. So your recommendation is for the future of the MAP Act, get rid of it.
Absolutely. And in fact, the North Carolina House of Representatives has unanimously voted to repeal it. And the bill is before the Senate now, and I hope they'll vote to repeal as well. We don't need the MAP Act. It's time for a better approach to transportation planning in North Carolina.